attending church regularly. We had small group. We were doing, leading worship and helping with various areas of ministry and doing all kinds of the normal stuff that people do. And I heard a sermon talking about this fully giving yourself over in a way that sounded very, very different, where you literally didn't have any control yourself, where it was all about submitting in this radical way. And I was quite stunned because I realized that maybe there were still pieces that I was hanging on to and that I was trying to control. I don't mean that in a negative way, but it was just, you're still running your life. And when I recognized that there was maybe more steps that we could take, I think we both started kind of praying, like, Lord, what do you want from us? And then it wasn't long after that I heard those words, I want my music in the world. And it was an audible, this is what I want you to do. And I realized, well, this is an answer to what I've been seeking as to how do I give and do more, and what is it that you want from me? And that was the beginning of a whole different dimension of living by faith. Having heard that word, it instigated all kinds of things, but what it started with was that I actually started producing and promoting gospel music concerts.
And in her job, we got to participate. We got to be involved. We got to go to the shows, volunteer backstage, and meet the musicians, which was exciting. And her friends would come over, and everyone was looking at her promotional DVDs and filling her packets, and everyone wanted to be involved, and everyone wanted to help.
When I was younger and my mom started planning festivals and other kinds of music outreach that God was telling her to do, I was still fairly young, so I couldn't be involved in any very big capacity, but I was involved in whatever way that I could be for how young I was. So I did mostly just face painting at festivals and running errands for performers.
At that time, this was the late 90s, I was one of only 2 people who was working as a professional gospel music promoter in all of Canada. And so we were really forging new territory. Now it's been done, but we were pioneering, and we were right out there, doing it for the first time. And some of those events were done in huge concert halls. Some of them were done in bars. Some of them were done in smaller theaters, but we were out there. And we were doing everything professionally and out in the world, and trying to do it in a way that just really wasn't being done up to that point. Up to that point, most events had only been taking place in churches. And then they hoped that the world would come to the church. But what we realized was, if you're going to be out in the world and you're going to do things professionally, then if you want the world to respond, you need to be in a place where they feel comfortable.
There's a kind of that juxtaposition of, should a musician be playing in church, just in church, or staying out of the church, or can you do both? And that question is always there. And when we heard this prophetic word, I think we both realized that a musician can do both.
So we're out in the world and we're doing these events, and not only are we seeing God do miraculous things, basically all the things we heard in the prophetic word about that people would get saved, that there wouldn't even have to be any preaching, and it was happening. Things were happening. People were wanting to be there. People were being drawn to the events and the concerts. Some people said that they would show up and they didn't know how they got there or why they got there. And then there would be a reason for it, and that God was speaking to them and touching them.
Deborah was putting on different concerts throughout the city, and I was a part of the Sidetrack Cafe gospel music series that she put on downtown in Edmonton. And it was a restaurant kind of bar feel, and it was really a lot of fun. And we had about 200 to 400 people come out to those events, Christians and non-Christians alike. And the neat thing is that as an artist, you can come out from the church and go into a place in the city, and other people can be blessed by your music as well.
But at the same time as this amazing spiritual high and understanding of God working in a completely different way was happening, we were also receiving a lot of persecution from within the church. And there was a lot of hatred coming at us because they didn't understand. And they didn't see why that had to be done this way. And one person actually sat me down and said, don't you understand that they're angry because look at the hundreds of people that are basically being moved and touched and saved, as a result of your obedience, you've never been to Bible school, you're a woman, you're leading something, you're doing something that the churches can't seem to do. I said, but I'm just trying to be obedient. I'm just doing what God's asked me to do. So it was a very strange thing, and through our entire faith walk, this is something that we noticed. There'd be these amazing spiritual highs, this amazing watching God work in ways that we had never ever seen and never would have seen if we hadn't stepped out to the degree of faith that we did. And at the same time, there would be persecution and hardships and trouble that came as a result.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. My chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior has ransomed me. And like a flood, His mercy reigns, unending love, amazing grace.
So the concerts came to a close. The Lord said that was the end of that. And so there was a bit of a dry spell and a difficult season. But then out of that, there was prison ministry and amazing things happened there. And there were a number of things that happened. And then we had a real sense that we would be moving soon. And we ended up being asked to sell our home and do all these things, basically let go of everything without knowing where we were going. So we put everything into a container, and then we went to our mountain retreat, basically, where he was playing, and we sought the Lord and said, where are we going? What are we doing? And every day that passed was a day closer to not having a temporary home and having no home at all and not sure what we were going to do.
When things started to happen that really caught our attention, it seemed like one thing at a time, but there was a whole series. And I think it began most significantly with getting passports and my wife waking up one morning and just having a strong sense, which I've seen her get before, and it's almost infallible because I know it comes from God. It would be infallible. And that we needed passports. And we thought, well, why would we need passports unless we're going somewhere outside of Canada? And so anyhow, we didn't have the money for that. But almost as if on cue, a friend of ours called up a day or two later and said, yeah, God told me to give you some money. And I have no idea what it's for, but he even gave me a specific amount to give you. And that turned out to be exactly or close to what the passports would have cost. So we thought, well, that's kind of crazy.
And it was at that point that we began to understand that we were to go to the land of our ancestors. We didn't understand what that meant. Originally, we thought that was somewhere in Canada. We were trying to figure that out, and it was quite an interesting and long process, or what seemed like a long time, although it was really weeks. And then we figured out that we were supposed to go to Scotland.
It's like, what's going on? I feel like I'm missing something. I'm sensing that something's going on, and I prayed about it, and I felt like God was telling me, like, there's changes coming ahead, and you're going to have to accept them. It's basically what I felt like. I didn't know where they're going, but I knew that they were leaving. And so when she talked to me about it, I wasn't at all surprised.
And to get the visas to live there would have taken normally, a long time, months, maybe even a year, to gather the information you need, because you need original documentation, not copies. And from that they had to be from Scotland. Well, it appears that her mother had all that already in place.
My daughter Deborah and son Stephen were involved in many Scottish-related activities to do with our heritage as they were growing up. Deborah was Highland dancing, Stephen was piping, and this continued through their teens and beyond. And at one point, Stephen decided, or was thinking about, going to Scotland to get a job and just move there for a while.
I mean, ultimately what had happened was I had asked Mom to pursue getting her passport because of her mom and dad being from Scotland and having found their birth certificates. And so I thought I was going to be going overseas, and it would be really helpful to somehow potentially do something with my own passport for my purposes. And that faded away, and Mom had done everything that was necessary. Yet then here was Deb saying, I think we need to get a visa and a passport so we can go over there. And I said, no, I think that was for you.
And when we applied for our visas, we thought, well, that could take anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks, is what they tell you. And we thought, that's cutting it close for us because we'll be out of a place to live before then. And we sent them away on a Monday afternoon, and they were in our hands Friday afternoon the same week, which I told to somebody who's quite familiar with government operations and politics and everything else that goes on. And he said, that just doesn't happen. I said, here they are. It did happen. And that kind of really sunk it into us that we were onto something that was quite different for us, unique for us, in fact, and something much bigger than we even had imagined would happen.
So there we were, planning to go to a place where we didn't know one person, not one person in the entire United Kingdom. We didn't know anything about it. We'd never been there before, and we didn't know how we were going to get there. We didn't know which city to go to or town. We just knew that we were supposed to go to Scotland.
The Lord has promised good to me. His word my hope secures. He will my shield and portion be, as long as life endures. My chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior has ransomed me. And like a flood, His mercy reigns, unending love, amazing grace. My chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior has ransomed me. And like a flood, His mercy reigns, unending love, amazing grace.
This is where the journey gets especially interesting. 5 of the 6 of us got on a plane and headed to this place that we'd never been, and with no idea why we were going, what we would be doing, where we would live, what would happen in terms of schools for the kids. We knew absolutely nothing. And I think that was never more powerfully, struck us until we actually arrived there and realized, prior to getting there, everything had fallen into place. And then we arrived and nothing was in place. And it was a very, very interesting season to try to figure out what we were doing, why we were there, what we were supposed to be doing while we were there. And actually, there were huge obstacles. huge obstacles, not the least of which was that within days of getting there, I found out that my dad had been diagnosed with terminal cancer. And we weren't able to find a house, and we weren't able to get a bank account, and we weren't able to figure out the school system in terms of what grades our kids were at, and that there was no schools available for them to get into until we had a home. And it was just this, it was a real turmoil.
So when I was 15 and my parents told me that we were moving to Scotland, at first I thought it was a little bit crazy, even growing up around parents who were very, well, out there as the world might see them. But once we got there, it didn't feel like it was wrong. It felt right. And it was hard because we didn't know anyone. My parents didn't have jobs set in place. We only had one suitcase with us each and didn't know a single soul, but we still felt very oddly at peace considering the situation.
When we went to Inverness, it was cool. It did feel like a place I could live, but I mean, searching for a home, searching for a school with no car, no idea of anything about the city or the people, or, I mean, really we didn't know anything, and it was kind of a new experience, you know, not just for us, but for our parents. Like, we were all in it together, which is not something I was used to. You know, you're used to your parents knowing exactly what's going on, and, you know, they were kind of confused too, and so it was definitely, we all just kind of jumped in together.
And it wasn't until a group of our friends back here began to pray and fast for us that things started to fall into place.
God gave me a dream one night, and this dream consisted of me and the Andrews family and a tornado. And there was a tornado coming down a path at racing speed, and I remember turning around. We started running, and I said to the Andrews, "Get down on the ground," and I put my body over top of theirs, and as I did, the tornado passed over us, not hurting any of us. And when I woke up that morning, I really felt the Lord saying to me, "That's all I need you to do. I need you to cover them in your prayers, in your love, and in your support, and I will do the rest." And at that time, there was breakthroughs in my heart. The anxiety, of course, lifted, and I became a little bit more full of faith and had people praying and fasting for the Andrews.
We didn't know, are we in the right place? Have we, you know, did we get the city wrong? We knew we were to come to Scotland, but did we get the city wrong?
And even with all the events that had taken place up to getting us to Scotland, how things just fell into place and how fast they fell into place, and it just basically swept us along. And then we get to Scotland, as my wife said, and it was like we were dropped into the desert and, hello, is anybody there? And there was a reason for that, which we could get to later, but still weren't quite sure because things kind of went silent for us. Did we come to the right place? Are we actually, in fact, crazy? Did we come all this way to find we're in the wrong place? We finally found, through much difficulty, a house to rent, and we had gotten a cell phone so we could communicate with people until we got a landline, and they said, oh, the landline will probably take about 2 weeks. Well, somebody gave us a phone. I plugged it into the outlet and said, hey, there's a dial tone. Why don't I try it? I thought, well, who should I call? I'll call my mom. Well, I called my mom in Nova Scotia, interestingly enough, which is New Scotland, calling her from Old Scotland. And told her we were there, had a house, and the phone's hooked up, and she said, oh, I've been waiting for you to call. She said, I've got something I have to tell you. And she started telling me this story of a locket she had since she was in grade 9. She graduated with a friend, and she gave her this picture locket with a picture of her friend in it. And she kept it all these years, never wore it, but kept it in her jewelry box along with the other 3,000 things she has there. And she said, I opened it yesterday, and she said, I saw a piece of paper underneath that cotton batting that's in those little blue boxes. And I said, oh. She said, yeah, I pulled it out, and it was all folded up. And she said it was an obituary. And I thought, okay, I'm not sure where this is going. She said it was the obituary of my favorite, I think it was her grandfather, who was there in Nova Scotia, and he died there. And it mentioned his ancestry and his, I'm not sure how the relative things work, the grandfathers, great-grandfathers, but it was his grandfather, I think, that mentioned he was from Inverness, Scotland, which is exactly where we ended up. And she said, I think you're in the right place.
So here we are in Inverness, Scotland. We know we're in the right city, but we still are not 100% sure why. And we end up coming across other families just like us from other countries who have arrived in the same place. We meet up in the same church, and none of us know why we've been sent. And this is where it gets really amazing and interesting, because how we ended up sorting out and understanding that we were a team and that we had been brought together by God in the most miraculous of ways was through dreams and visions. And so all of these things started to happen, and some of us had never had God speak to us in this way before, so it was really quite miraculous. So it was through the dreams and the visions that we found out and discovered we were a team. It was through those dreams and visions that God showed us what we were to do and how we were to do it, gave us instructions at every step of the way, confirmed things within the group, and helped us to know how to execute his plan, which was had far more levels and layers going on than what I think any of us had ever experienced.
Looking back on it, it was kind of, I mean, in the moment of it, it was hard to kind of see what was happening, but I mean, coming back to Canada and looking back at our experience, I think I kind of, realized, like, I mean, they didn't have jobs, we didn't have a car, we didn't have any of these things, but that didn't matter because God still provided for us and still made sure that, we got to go to school and we got to eat and we got to make friends and make memories and just learn so much while we were there. And it was just an amazing experience, considering, people were telling us, well, you can't do this, and there was so much against us, but God still provided all the things that we needed or wanted or anything, because he asked us to go there. So, I mean, we weren't even earning any money, and we survived for a year and a half there. Like, how else does that happen?
The earth shall soon dissolve like snow, the sun forbear to shine.